Don't drink that!
A homeless woman, soaked, standing in the middle of a fancy cafe, begging a man in a $3,000 suit to put the cup down. He looked her up and down with contempt.
Madam, please stay away from my table.
The woman tried to say,
Sir, someone put something in your cup. I saw it. That coffee will kill you.
He almost laughed. A billionaire, surrounded by bodyguards, holding an espresso, was warned by a black woman. He raised the cup to his lips. She knocked it out of his hand. The frothy coffee shattered on the marble floor. Security officers grabbed her arm. Tanya Moore had just saved the billionaire's life. No one in the cafe understood what was happening. No one knew what was in that cup. And Tanya had no idea how things were about to change. But to understand why Tanya was in that cafe that morning, and why her eyes were sharp enough to catch what no one else saw, you need to know what the last 14 months had taken from her. 5:45 a.m., Gracefield Women's Shelter, Southside Chicago. Tanya Moore opened her eyes to the same fluorescent buzz she'd heard every morning for the past 11 months. The same cots squeaking around her. The same smell, instant oatmeal mixed with industrial disinfectant. She sat up and folded her blanket. Crisp edges, perfect corners, a habit from her old life, back when order still meant something. Back when she had a life worth keeping in order. 14 months ago, Tanya was a Level 3 pharmaceutical lab technician at MedAlliance Testing Labs in suburban Illinois. She had a 2-bedroom apartment, a used Honda Civic, shared custody of her daughter, Brielle. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. Then MedAlliance shut down overnight. A regulatory scandal, falsified safety data. Tanya had nothing to do with it, but that didn't matter. The layoffs came without warning. No severance, no references, just a cardboard box and a locked door. 4 months later, missed rent, eviction, car repossessed. Her sister took Brielle in, just for a little while. That little while turned into months, then seasons. Tanya had been applying everywhere since. Labs, pharmacies, hospital supply chains, anything that used her chemistry background. She'd sent out over 200 applications, not one callback. Turns out, a 14-month gap on a resume isn't just a gap, it's a wall, and nobody wants to climb it for you. Miss Alma, the elderly woman who ran the shelter, shuffled over with a cup of weak coffee. "You look like you got a plan today, baby." Tanya smiled. "I always got a plan, Miss Alma. Plans are free." Alma chuckled and squeezed her shoulder. "That's what I like about you. World keeps knocking, you keep planning." Tanya wrapped both hands around the warm cup. She didn't tell Alma the truth, that her plan today was the same as yesterday. Walk 40 minutes to the public library, use the computer, print resumes, pray someone calls back. The library was her office now. Every morning, same routine. She'd count coins from a Ziploc bag, just enough for 3 printed pages. She'd smooth her one good blouse in the restroom mirror, tuck her shelter ID deep in her bag where no interviewer could ever glimpse it. Then she'd sit at the computer and pretend she was still someone. But here's the thing about Tanya. Even at rock bottom, her mind never stopped working. Most people in her situation would use the library computer to check email or scroll job boards. Tanya did that too. But after she was done applying, she'd open pharmaceutical trade journals. Not for leads, because she genuinely loved the science. She'd skim articles about drug recalls, compound interactions, clinical trial failures. She'd mouth the chemical names under her breath. Sometimes she'd catch errors the articles themselves missed. Today, one article caught her attention. A research paper on synthetic sweetener compounds, a specific class of sugar substitutes used in food-grade pharmaceutical products. The paper discussed potential cardiac interactions, but glossed over a critical detail. Tanya saw it immediately. A cross-reaction with antiarrhythmic medications. The kind of interaction that doesn't just cause discomfort, it mimics a heart attack. Quietly, without a trace. She scribbled a note on scrap paper, an old habit from her lab days. She didn't know why she wrote it down. Maybe instinct, maybe stubbornness, maybe because her brain refused to stop being a scientist, even when the world had decided she wasn't one anymore. That note would matter later, more than she could possibly imagine. On the walk back to the shelter, Tanya's phone buzzed. Brielle. Mom, are you coming to the science fair next month? Tanya closed her eyes. 12 years old, and still believing her mother could show up. I'll be there, baby, I promise. For real this time? For real. She hung up, pressed the phone against her forehead, breathed. Promises are expensive when you can't even afford bus fare. She passed Cornerstone Café on the way back, an upscale coffee shop she could never afford to walk into. But Ray Cooper, the young barista she'd befriended over weeks of walking past, spotted her through the window. He waved her in. Employee perk, he said, sliding a small coffee and a day-old muffin across the counter. Don't tell my manager. Tanya sat by the window. For 20 minutes, she wasn't homeless. She was just a woman drinking coffee, watching people come and go, studying faces, finding small, stolen moments of peace in a world that had stopped offering them. On the wall behind her, there was a framed newspaper article, a local business award, some corporate gala photo, the cafe owner shaking hands with someone important. The photo was small, half hidden behind a potted plant. Tanya didn't notice it. Neither will you. But the man in that photo will matter, very soon. But what Tanya didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that tomorrow morning she'd walk into this same cafe. She'd sit in this same seat, and she'd witness something that would force her to make an impossible choice. A choice between staying invisible and saving a stranger's life. Tanya thought the worst part of her week was behind her. Another round of applications, another round of silence. Same story, different day. She was wrong. Because what was about to happen in that cafe wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was planned. And she was the only person standing between a man's life and someone else's plan to end it. The next morning. Cold rain. The kind that doesn't fall. It attacks. Tanya pulled her jacket tighter and pushed through the door of Cornerstone Café. Ray saw her from behind the counter and nodded, their usual signal. She slid into a seat near the window, and within a minute, a small coffee and a leftover croissant appeared on her table. Rough one out there, Ray said. Rough one in here, too, she smiled. But today the cafe felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air had shifted. A man stood near the entrance, dark coat, earpiece, hands folded. Not a customer. Security. The kind that doesn't order anything because they're not there for coffee. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb, engine running, tinted windows. And in the back corner, the best seat in the house, sat a man Tanya had never seen before. Late 50s, silver hair, a charcoal suit that fit like it was sewn onto him. He was reading a tablet, 2 phones arranged neatly on the table. He didn't look up when Tanya walked in. He didn't look up when Ray brought his espresso. He didn't need to look at anyone, because everyone in the room was already looking at him. Tanya noticed 3 things. First, a small leather folio beside his cup, embossed with interlocking letters, CB. She didn't know what it stood for. Not yet. Second, 2 prescription bottles, half hidden under the tablet. Orange caps, pharmacy labels. She recognized the shape immediately. Cardiac medication, the kind prescribed for arrhythmia patients. Third, and this one made her stomach tighten, a man sitting at the table directly across from the older gentleman. Mid-30s, gray hoodie, a latte in front of him. He was scrolling his phone casually, too casually. Every few seconds his eyes flicked up, not at his screen, at the man in the suit. Tanya had lived on the streets long enough to know what watching looks like. That man wasn't relaxing. He was waiting. His name was Spencer, but Tanya didn't know that yet. She didn't need to. Her gut already knew something was off. Then it happened. The older man's phone rang. He picked up. Something about a board meeting, quarterly numbers, a name Tanya didn't recognize. He stood, stepped toward the window, and turned his back to the table. His security guard followed. Instinct, habit, protect the man, not the coffee. That's when Spencer moved. He stood up, smooth, unhurried, like a man heading to the restroom. He walked past the older man's table, and in one fluid motion, his hand passed over the espresso cup. A tiny vial, no bigger than a pinky finger, tilted. 2, maybe 3 drops. Clear liquid. No color. No smell. Then he kept walking. Didn't look back. Sat down at his table. Picked up his phone. Like nothing happened. The whole thing took less than 3 seconds. Tanya's breath caught in her throat. She looked around the cafe. Ray was grinding beans, the machine roaring. 2 other customers were buried in their phones. The security guard had his back turned, standing beside the older man near the window. Nobody saw it. Nobody. Just her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stared at the espresso cup. The surface looked the same, dark, rich, steaming. But then she saw it. A thin film, almost invisible. An oily sheen that didn't belong on black coffee. Most people would never notice, but Tanya had spent 7 years staring into test tubes and petri dishes. Her eyes were trained to see what shouldn't be there. And right now, something shouldn't be there. Her brain fired. The article she'd read yesterday. The synthetic sweetener compound. The cross-reaction with cardiac medications. The one that mimics a heart attack. No trace, no evidence. A perfect, silent death. She looked at the prescription bottles on his table, then at the cup, then at Spencer, sitting 3 meters away, phone in hand, perfectly calm. The older man finished his call, walked back, sat down, reached for his cup. Tanya's hands gripped the edge of her table so hard her knuckles went white. Every survival instinct she had screamed the same thing. Don't. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. You're a homeless black woman in a fancy cafe. You say one word and they'll call the police. You'll lose your shelter spot. You'll lose everything. But she watched his fingers curl around the cup. She watched it rise toward his lips. And she knew, with absolute scientific certainty, that if he drank that coffee, he would die. The cup touched his lips. Tanya made her choice. What happened next took less than 60 seconds, but for Tanya Moore, it felt like a lifetime. And for everyone else in that cafe, it was a moment they would never forget. She stood so fast her chair crashed backward against the tile floor. The sound cracked through the cafe like a gunshot. Don't drink that! Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The espresso cup froze an inch from the older man's lips. A single drop ran down the rim and fell onto the white saucer. Derek, the security guard, was already moving. 2 steps, hand inside his jacket, body between his boss and this screaming stranger. Step back, now. Tanya didn't step back. She raised both hands, palms open, fingers spread, the universal sign for, I'm not a threat. Please, listen to me. Someone put something in that cup. I watched him do it. That man in the gray hoodie, he dropped something into the coffee when you were on the phone. She pointed at Spencer. The whole cafe turned to look. Spencer, still seated, still calm, raised his eyebrows. Then he did something that made Tanya's blood run cold. He smiled. I'm sorry. What? Spencer said, standing slowly. His voice was smooth, educated, relaxed. I didn't go near anyone's table. I've been sitting right here the whole time. He looked around the room, palms up, the picture of innocence. I mean, look at her. And they did. Every single person in that cafe looked at Tanya. Torn jacket, wet hair plastered to her forehead, worn-out shoes held together by habit more than material, hands still shaking. Then they looked at Spencer. Clean clothes, calm face, reasonable voice. And just like that, without a single piece of evidence, they chose who to believe. The woman near the door muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Just get her out. She's obviously disturbed. A man at the counter shook his head and turned back to his laptop. Already dismissed her. Already forgotten. Ray, the barista, the one who gave her free coffee, the one who waved her in from the cold, stood behind the counter, mouth open, eyes wide. He said nothing. He didn't defend her. He didn't vouch for her. He just stood there, gripping a towel, terrified of losing his job. Tanya felt it, the silence where his voice should have been. It hurt more than any of the stares. Derek stepped closer. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. Let her go. The older man's voice. Quiet. Controlled. Not angry. Just done. He set the cup back on the saucer and looked at Tanya the way people look at something they've already categorized. A nuisance. A disruption. A problem to be removed politely. I appreciate your concern, he said. The politeness was worse than cruelty. Cold. Final. But I think you're mistaken. Please, let my security help you outside. Derek reached for her arm. And this, right here, is the moment where most people would have walked away. Head down, swallowed the humiliation, told themselves, I tried, and disappeared back into the rain and the cold and the invisibility. Tanya almost did. She felt the pull toward the door, the gravity of shame, the weight of every pair of eyes in that cafe confirming what the world had been telling her for 14 months. You are nothing. Your voice does not matter. Sit down. Be quiet. Be invisible. But then she saw the cup, still sitting on the table, steam still rising, poison still waiting. And she knew, not believed, not suspected, knew that if she walked out that door, this man would pick up that cup, and he would die. And no one would ever know it wasn't natural. They'd call it cardiac arrest. They'd shake their heads. And somewhere, the man in the gray hoodie would smile. Tanya pulled her arm from Derek's grip, not violently, firmly. 30 seconds, she said. Her voice changed. The panic was gone. The desperation was gone. What replaced it was something no one in that cafe expected from a woman who looked like her. Precision. Give me 30 seconds. If I'm wrong, I walk out myself. No police, no scene. You'll never see me again. The older man studied her face. Something in her tone, the steadiness, the unshakable certainty, made him pause. He glanced at Derek, then back at Tanya. A long second passed. 30 seconds. Tanya turned to Ray. "I need a clean glass, a sugar packet, and half a lemon." Ray looked at his manager. The manager shrugged. 30 seconds, what's the harm? Ray slid the items across the counter with trembling hands. His hands were shaking worse than hers. Tanya moved quickly, calm, precise, hands steady. The hands of a woman who'd done this 10,000 times in a laboratory she no longer had access to. She poured a small amount of coffee from the older man's cup into the clean glass. She squeezed 3 drops of lemon juice into it. Citric acid, the simplest reagent available in any kitchen. The reaction was immediate. The liquid shifted from dark brown to a murky, unnatural gray. Tiny bubbles formed on the surface, fizzing, crawling, rising in clusters that had no business being there. Normal coffee with lemon lightens slightly. It never turns gray. It never foams like this. The cafe went dead silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence where you can hear people breathe. Tanya held the glass up so everyone could see. This reaction indicates a synthetic compound that doesn't belong in coffee. Citric acid reacts with it to produce a gray precipitate, a marker for a glycoside derivative. She glanced at the prescription bottles on his table. If that compound enters the bloodstream alongside antiarrhythmic medication, it triggers a cascade that mimics myocardial infarction, a heart attack, clean, no traces in a standard autopsy. She set the glass down on the table, the gray liquid still fizzing. "That coffee was designed to kill you, sir, and the man who did it is sitting right over—" She turned to point at Spencer's table. Empty. The chair pushed back, the latte barely touched, the door just clicking shut. Derek spun and bolted for the exit. He shoved through the door into the rain, scanned the street left and right, but the car that had been parked across from the cafe was already pulling away. Tires hissing on wet asphalt. No plates visible. No trace. Gone. The older man stared at his espresso cup, then at the glass with the gray liquid still bubbling quietly, then at Tanya. His face had lost all color. His hands that had signed billion-dollar deals, were trembling. He pushed the cup away from him, slowly, deliberately, like he was pushing away a loaded gun. "You—" His voice cracked. The composure was gone. "How did you—" Tanya exhaled. Her shoulders dropped. The adrenaline was leaving her body, and what was left behind was exhaustion. Deep, bone-level exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. "I read a lot," she said quietly, "and I used to work in this field." Behind the counter, Ray wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He wasn't crying because of the drama. He was crying because 3 minutes ago, the woman he called a friend needed one voice, just one, and he'd stood there like a coward. The woman near the door, the one who said, "Just get her out," stared down at her own hands. She couldn't look up. She wouldn't look up for a long time. And Spencer's empty chair sat in the middle of the cafe, like a confession no one wanted to read. Philip Caldwell wasn't used to being told no, but that morning he heard it twice, once from the woman who saved his life, and once from his own conscience. The next 20 minutes blurred together. Lieutenant Diane Walsh arrived. Someone had called 911 about a disturbance. 2 patrol cars, flashing lights through the rain-streaked windows. Walsh was sharp, mid-40s, the kind of officer who listened more than she talked. She took statements from everyone. Ray described what happened, tripping over his own words. Derek gave a physical description of Spencer: height, build, clothing, the direction the car went. The cafe manager paced behind the counter. already thinking about liability. Walsh sealed the espresso cup in an evidence bag. She called forensics. Then she turned to Tanya. "Ma'am, I'm going to need your full name and a way to reach you." Tanya hesitated. She didn't want her name in any system. Every interaction with authority carried risk for someone in her position. A question could become a background check. A background check could become a complication. A complication could become one more wall between her and Brielle. But she gave her name, quietly, spelled it out. Walsh wrote it down without judgment. "You may have just prevented a homicide, Ms. Moore. We'll be in touch." Tanya nodded. Then she turned toward the door. That's when Philip stood up. He'd been sitting in silence since the experiment, watching the officers work, watching Tanya answer questions with calm, technical language that didn't match anything about her appearance. The way she said glycoside derivative the same way most people say good morning. The way she held Walsh's gaze without flinching. Something didn't add up. And Philip Caldwell was a man who had built an empire on noticing when things didn't add up. He crossed the café and blocked her path to the door. Not aggressively, gently, like a man who understood he was about to ask something he didn't deserve to ask. He pulled out his wallet. $500 bills. He held them out to her. "Please, take this. It's the least I can—" "No." The word came out before he finished the sentence. Firm, not rude, just absolute. Tanya looked at the money. $500. She needed it more than he could possibly understand. $500 was 3 months of bus fare. $500 was Brielle's science fair supplies. $500 was a door between her and the cold. But something in her wouldn't take it. "I didn't do this for money," she said. "I did it because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight." Philip blinked. In his world, everyone wanted something. Every handshake had a price. Every favor had a footnote. And here was a woman with nothing, offering the most valuable thing she had, and asking for 0 in return. He tried again. "Then let me help some other way. An introduction, a phone call. I know people who—" "I appreciate that. I really do." She smiled, and the smile was real, but tired. The kind of smile that's held up by willpower, not joy. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." She stepped around him and walked toward the door. Philip reached into his leather folio, the one with the CB monogram, and pulled out a business card. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. He caught her at the door and pressed it into her hand. "If you ever change your mind." Tanya glanced at the card. The words hit her one at a time. Philip Caldwell, Chairman and CEO, Caldwell Biomedical Industries. She didn't react, not visibly. She nodded, slipped the card into her jacket pocket, and walked out into the rain. But outside, standing on the wet sidewalk, rain hitting her face, something broke open inside her. She pulled the card out and read it again. Caldwell Biomedical. She knew that name. Everyone in pharmaceutical science knew that name. One of the largest biomedical firms in the Midwest. And the man she'd just saved, the quiet man with the tablet and the espresso, ran it. Her hands shook, not from cold. She put the card back in her pocket and kept walking. Behind her, inside the cafe, Philip Caldwell stood at the window, watching her disappear into the rain. He turned to Derek. "Find out everything about her. And find the man in the gray hoodie." Tanya thought she'd never see Philip Caldwell again. She figured it was one of those once-in-a-lifetime collisions. 2 strangers, 1 terrible moment, then back to separate worlds. She was wrong. And what was coming next would prove that the distance between their worlds was never as far as she believed. That night, back at the shelter, Tanya sat on her cot and turned the business card over in her hands, over and over, tracing the embossed letters with her thumb like they were braille. Elma noticed. She always noticed. "What you got there, baby?" "Just a card. A man I met at the café." Elma raised an eyebrow but didn't push. She'd learned that Tanya shared things on her own schedule, or not at all. The next morning at the library, Tanya typed Philip Caldwell into the search bar. Her eyes widened as she scrolled. Net worth? 11 figures. Board memberships across 3 continents. A philanthropy portfolio that included hospitals, research grants, and rural health clinics. A recent profile in a major business magazine about Caldwell Biomedical's expansion into affordable cardiac medication for underserved communities. Tanya stared at that last line for a long time. Affordable cardiac medication for underserved communities. And she, a woman from one of those communities, had just saved the man building the program, using knowledge the world had decided she no longer deserved to have. The irony almost made her laugh. She closed the browser, put the business card back in her Ziploc bag next to her coins and her last 3 printed resumes. She didn't call. 3 blocks east and 40 floors up, Philip Caldwell was not waiting. He was working. Derek's report landed on his desk that afternoon. Everything about Tanya Moore laid out in black and white. Age 41, former Level 3 lab technician, certified in pharmaceutical compound analysis, 7 years of outstanding performance reviews. Terminated, not for cause. Facility shut down. Currently homeless. Residing at Gracefield Women's Shelter, Southside. 1 daughter, Brielle, age 12, living with Tanya's older sister. Over 200 job applications submitted in the past year. 0 callbacks. Philip read the report twice, then a third time. Beside it sat a second report, the security investigation. Camera footage from the cafe confirmed everything. Spencer's hand over the cup, the vial, the drops. Forensics confirmed the substance, a synthetic glycoside derivative, exactly what Tanya described. Fatal when combined with Philip's medication. But one line in the security report made Philip's jaw tighten. Subject demonstrated detailed knowledge of target's medication schedule, daily routine, and preferred cafe location. Profile suggests insider access. Insider. Philip picked up the phone and called Nina. "I need you in my office, now." What Philip discovered next didn't just change how he saw Tanya Moore. It shattered everything he believed about the man sitting 3 doors down from his own office. Nina Caldwell arrived within the hour. Early 30s, sharp jaw, sharper instincts. She'd spent 5 years as VP of Corporate Responsibility at Caldwell Biomedical, a role most people assumed was ceremonial. It wasn't. Nina didn't do ceremonial. Philip slid both reports across the desk. "Read these." Nina read. Slowly. Her face shifted with each page. Confusion, then focus, then something harder. When she finished, she looked up. Insider access. Who had your full schedule, your medication details, and your cafe routine? Philip leaned back. 3 people. You, Derek, and Victor. The names sat in the room like smoke. Victor Harlan, Chief Financial Officer, 15 years at Caldwell Biomedical. The man who'd stood beside Philip through every acquisition, every crisis, every late-night board call. Philip had called him the brother I chose. They'd golfed together on Sundays. Their families had shared Thanksgivings. Nina shook her head slowly. "Dad, you can't seriously think. I'm not thinking anything yet. I'm asking you to look. So Nina looked. She started with what she had access to: financial records, internal communications, corporate governance filings. What she found in the first 2 hours made her stomach turn. 6 months ago, Victor had quietly taken out a cross-ownership life insurance policy on Philip, the kind of contract buried in corporate legalese that most board members never read. Under its terms, if Philip died, Victor, as the second largest individual shareholder, would assume temporary executive control of Caldwell Biomedical until the board elected a new CEO. Temporary control. That phrase meant everything. Because sitting on Philip's desk, unsigned, rejected 3 times, was a merger proposal. Meridian Health Group wanted to absorb Caldwell Biomedical's consumer health division in a deal worth $2.8 billion. Philip had blocked it every time. He called it a sellout. He said it would gut the company's mission. Victor had pushed for it every time, quietly, persistently. And buried in the deal's fine print, which Nina had to read 4 times to find, was a brokerage commission clause. If the merger went through, Victor Harlan would personally receive a $34 million advisory fee. $34 million. All he needed was Philip out of the way. Not forever, just long enough to sign one document. Nina printed the insurance policy, the merger proposal, the commission clause. She laid them on her father's desk in a row like evidence in a trial. Philip stared at them. His face didn't move, but his hands, flat on the desk, were trembling. 15 years. 15 years of trust, and every single day of it had been a lie. But Nina wasn't done. She pulled the thread further, past Victor, past the finances, all the way back to the beginning, back to MedAlliance testing labs. MedAlliance had been a subcontractor for Caldwell Biomedical's consumer health division. They tested compounds, ran safety analyses, filed reports. And the person at Caldwell Biomedical who managed that contract, who hired MedAlliance, who supervised their output, who decided what reports reached the safety board and what reports didn't, was Victor Harlan. Nina found the records. 18 months ago, a Level 3 lab technician at MedAlliance had filed an internal safety report. The report flagged a synthetic glycoside compound, the exact same class of compound found in Philip's coffee, and documented its dangerous cross-reaction with cardiac medications. The report was detailed, thorough, precise. It recommended an immediate product review and a consumer safety advisory. The technician's name was Tanya Moore. That report was sent to Victor Harlan's office for review and escalation to Caldwell's safety board. It never arrived. Victor buried it. Then, 2 months later, he initiated the closure of MedAlliance, citing the regulatory scandal as justification. But Nina could see now that the scandal was the cover. The real reason was the report. Victor couldn't risk someone else finding what Tanya had found. So he shut the whole facility down, scattered the employees, erased the trail. And Tanya, the woman who'd written the warning, lost everything. Her job, her apartment, her car, her daughter. Her entire life collapsed because one man decided her work was inconvenient. And then, 18 months later, that same man used the knowledge from her own report to try to kill Philip. Nina sat across from her father. Neither of them spoke for a long time. He used her research, Nina finally said. He read her report. He understood the compound interaction she described. And he weaponized it. Philip closed his eyes. The woman who saved your life, Dad. Victor destroyed hers. She wrote the warning that could have prevented all of this. He buried it. He buried her. And she still showed up in that cafe and saved you anyway, without knowing any of it. Philip opened his eyes. They were wet. He picked up the phone, dialed a number from Derek's report. It rang 4 times. Tanya answered. She always answered, hoping it was a callback from a job application. "Ms. Moore, this is Philip Caldwell." Silence. "I need to see you, not to repay a favor. I need to talk to you about your work." "My work?" "Your lab report, the one from MedAlliance, the one about the glycoside compound." He paused. "The one that was buried by someone I trusted." A longer silence. Then, quietly, "You found that?" "My daughter found it. And Ms. Moore, I need you to understand something. That report should have been on my desk 18 months ago. It wasn't. Because the man who hid it is the same man who tried to kill me." On the other end, Tanya sat on her cot in the shelter. Alma watched from across the room. Tanya's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes filled, not with sadness, with something closer to vindication. For months, she'd believed that report was meaningless, that nobody cared, that her work had disappeared into nothing. It hadn't disappeared. It had been silenced. And the man who silenced it had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because the woman he erased was still here, still reading, still watching, still sharp enough to catch what everyone else missed. "When do you want to meet?" she said. "Tomorrow morning. My office. I'll send a car." Tanya expected a thank you, maybe a check, maybe a handshake and a photo for someone's corporate newsletter. She didn't expect what Philip Caldwell actually put on the table, and she definitely didn't expect what happened before she even sat down. 7:48 a.m. The black SUV pulled up outside Gracefield Women's Shelter. Derek stepped out, opened the rear door, and waited. Tanya stood in the doorway, wearing her one good blouse, the same one she wore to every interview that never called back. She'd ironed it that morning with a borrowed iron on a folded towel. Her shoes were clean. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands were steady. Alma stood behind her, both hands on Tanya's shoulders. "Whatever happens in that building, you walk in there knowing who you are. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you come back and tell me everything." Tanya hugged her. Tight, fast. The kind of hug that says thank you for keeping me alive long enough to get here. And walked to the car. The ride downtown took 22 minutes. Tanya watched Chicago scroll past through tinted glass. The same skyline she used to commute past every morning in her Honda Civic. The same buildings, the same bridges, the same river, but from a different seat. A seat she hadn't earned yet. A seat she wasn't sure she deserved. The Caldwell Biomedical Tower rose 40 stories above Michigan Avenue, glass and steel. The lobby alone was bigger than the entire shelter. A security guard at the front desk had a badge already printed with her name, Kanya Moore, Visitor, Executive Floor. She clipped it on and stepped into the elevator. The doors were mirrored. She caught her own reflection. And for the first time in 14 months, she didn't look away. She straightened her collar and rode up. But before Tanya reached the conference room, something else was happening 2 floors below. Victor Harlan arrived at 7:30 a.m., same time as always, same parking spot, same elevator, same confident stride past the assistants who greeted him by name. 15 years of routine, 15 years of being untouchable. He pushed open the door to his office. 2 people were already inside. A man and a woman, dark suits, federal badges, FBI. Victor stopped in the doorway. His briefcase slipped an inch in his grip. "Mr. Harlan," the woman said, "please sit down." "What is this? I have a meeting at..." Sit down, Mr. Harlan. He sat. They laid it out piece by piece. The cafe footage, the forensic analysis, the life insurance policy, the buried safety report, the commission clause in the Meridian merger. Spencer, who'd been picked up at a motel in Indiana 6 hours earlier and was already talking. Victor's face didn't crack, not at first. He listened with the composure of a man who'd spent his career controlling boardrooms. But when they played the audio, Spencer's recorded statement naming Victor as the one who hired him, who provided the compound, who told him exactly what time Philip would be alone with his coffee, something behind his eyes went dark. Not guilt. Recognition. The recognition of a man watching his own architecture collapse. They cuffed him at his desk, in his own office. 15 years of handshakes and holiday cards and "Brother, I trust you," and it ended with steel on his wrists and a walk past every employee who'd ever called him sir. Philip watched from the hallway. He didn't go in. He didn't need to. He just stood there as they walked Victor past him. Victor paused, looked at Philip, opened his mouth like he was going to say something, an excuse, a justification, maybe even an apology. Philip turned away. That was enough. Nina touched her father's arm. "She's here, Dad. Conference room." Tanya was standing at the glass wall, looking out at the city below. She turned when they walked in. No board members, no lawyers, no cameras. Just Philip and Nina. This was personal. Philip placed a printed, bound document on the table. Tanya recognized it immediately. Her own handwriting in the margins. Her MedAlliance lab report. "This is yours," Philip said, "and it's the reason I'm still alive." Twice. Then he laid out what he was offering. Not charity, not guilt money. A position. A full-time role as Senior Safety Analyst in Caldwell Biomedical's newly created Consumer Compound Review Division. A division being built specifically because of the gap her report had exposed, and Victor had hidden. A signing package, 6 months of housing assistance, relocation support, full medical benefits starting day one. Legal support through Caldwell's Employee Assistance Program to help her regain full custody of Brielle. And a scholarship fund, in her name, the Tanya Moore Fellowship for Displaced Pharmaceutical Professionals re-entering the field. Caldwell Biomedical would fund the first 5 years. Tanya stared at the documents. Her jaw tightened. She didn't cry. Not yet. She asked questions. Sharp, specific, technical questions. What's the reporting structure? Who oversees the division? If I flag a compound, does it go through committee, or do I have direct access to the board? Nina and Philip exchanged a glance. Nina smiled. "You report to me. And yes, direct board access. No committees, no filters. That's the entire point. We built this division because one report got buried. That will never happen again." Tanya was quiet for a long moment. The city hummed 40 floors below. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I didn't save you to get a job, and I don't want this job because you feel guilty." Philip nodded. "I know. That's exactly why I want you. You're the person who says what nobody wants to hear. And you're right. My company failed because it didn't have someone like you in the room. I won't make that mistake again." Tanya picked up the pen, looked at it, looked at the document, looked at Philip. She signed. And then, only then, she let the tears come, quietly. One hand pressed over her mouth, the other hand still holding the pen. Nina reached across the table and held her wrist. Not her hand, her wrist. The way you hold someone who's been treading water for 14 months and just felt solid ground. Philip turned to face the window. He watched the city below, traffic crawling, people moving, the whole sprawling machine of Chicago grinding forward. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. He wasn't a man who cried, but his reflection was. But Tanya's story didn't end in that conference room. In fact, it was just beginning. And the ripple from one scream in a cafe was about to reach places no one, least of all Tanya, ever expected. Week 1. Tanya moved into a furnished one-bedroom apartment on the north side. Nothing fancy, beige walls, basic furniture, a kitchen that smelled like fresh paint. But it had a door that locked, a window with curtains, a bed that didn't fold. She set Brielle's photo on the nightstand. It was the first flat surface she'd had in over a year that belonged to her. She stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, opening and closing the refrigerator. Not because she needed anything, because she could. That night she slept 8 straight hours. No fluorescent buzz, no cots squeaking, no one coughing 3 feet away. Just silence and a ceiling that was hers. Month 2. Custody proceedings began. With stable employment, a permanent address, and Caldwell's legal team behind her, the process moved faster than anyone expected. Tanya's sister, who had never wanted to keep Brielle from her mother, only wanted Brielle safe, signed the transfer paperwork without hesitation. Brielle visited the apartment for the first time on a Saturday morning. She walked through the door, looked around the living room, looked at the kitchen, looked at her mother. "Mom, you have a fridge." They laughed until they couldn't breathe. Then they cried. Then they laughed again. Month 4. Brielle moved in full-time. Her room was small, just a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf Tanya assembled herself from a flat pack she bought with her first paycheck. But on that bookshelf sat 3 things: Brielle's science textbooks, a framed photo of Tanya in her old lab coat, and a second-place trophy from the school science fair. The project? Pharmaceutical compound safety. Brielle had presented it to a gymnasium full of parents, teachers, and one very biased judge named Tanya Moore, who sat in the 3rd row, hands clasped, tears running down her face, keeping the promise she'd made on a borrowed phone 14 months ago. At Caldwell Biomedical, Tanya didn't just fill a role, she redefined it. In its first 6 months, the Consumer Compound Review Division, her division, flagged 3 separate safety concerns in Caldwell's product pipeline. One involved a preservative interaction in a pediatric supplement line. Another caught a labeling error that could have triggered allergic reactions in thousands of patients. The third led to a voluntary product reformulation that quietly prevented what Caldwell's legal team later estimated would have been a $140 million class action lawsuit. 3 flags, 3 catches. 3 disasters that never happened, because one woman was finally in the room where the reports landed. The FDA took notice. In its annual compliance review, the agency cited Caldwell Biomedical's new internal safety process as a model for proactive consumer protection. They didn't name Tanya. She didn't want them to. But the industry knew. Nina presented the division's first-year results at the National Pharmaceutical Safety Conference in Washington, D.C. Standing at the podium, she said one line that made the room go quiet. "This division exists because a woman who had every reason to stay silent chose not to. She had been ignored, dismissed, and discarded by the very industry she was trying to protect. And she still showed up. That's not compliance. That's conscience." The applause lasted 40 seconds. Tanya wasn't in the room. She was at home, helping Brielle with homework. The ripple kept spreading. The Tanya Moore Fellowship awarded its first 3 grants to displaced pharmaceutical workers trying to re-enter the field. A single father from Detroit retraining as a lab analyst. A recent immigrant from Guatemala with a chemistry degree and no U.S. certification. A 56-year-old woman from Ohio who'd been laid off after 30 years and told she was too old to restart. Cornerstone Cafe became something it never planned to be, a landmark. Ray Cooper mounted a small brass plaque near the corner table, the seat where it started. Regulars knew the story. New customers asked about it. Ray told them every time, and every time, his voice cracked in the same place. Alma's shelter received a $200,000 grant from Caldwell Biomedical's charitable foundation, enough to expand from 30 beds to 50, enough to add a job training center, enough to install a real kitchen that served real meals, not instant oatmeal from a packet. Philip attended the ribbon cutting. He shook Alma's hand. She held it with both of hers and looked him dead in the eye. You didn't save her, Mr. Caldwell. She saved you. And then you did the right thing with it. Philip smiled. Yes, ma'am, I did. 1 year later, Tanya Moore walked into Cornerstone Cafe for the last time as someone who needed a free coffee. November again. Same cafe, same window, same corner table. But everything else, different. She wore a tailored coat, charcoal gray. Her employee badge clipped to the inside pocket read, Caldwell Biomedical, Consumer Safety Division. Brielle walked beside her, backpack over one shoulder, earbuds around her neck, trying very hard to look like she wasn't excited to be there. Ray saw them from behind the counter. His whole face opened up. The usual? 2, actually. Tanya pulled out her wallet. And I'm paying this time. Ray shook his head, grinning. About time, Moore. They sat at the corner table. Brielle spread her homework across the surface. Biology, ironically. Tanya pulled out a pharmaceutical journal. Same habit, different life. For a few minutes, they were just a mother and daughter in a coffee shop. Nothing more, nothing less. And for Tanya, that ordinary moment was worth more than anything on her paycheck. Then the door opened. A young woman stepped in, early 20s, damp jacket, hair pulled back tight, eyes scanning the room the way Tanya used to, fast, cautious, measuring whether she belonged. She hovered near the entrance, one hand gripping her bag strap, the other hanging at her side like she didn't know what to do with it. She didn't order. She just stood there, trying to decide whether to stay or disappear. Tanya watched her for 5 seconds. That was all she needed. She stood up, crossed the cafe, and stopped in front of the girl. Hey, you want to sit down? My daughter and I have an extra chair. The young woman blinked. Yeah, okay, thanks. Tanya bought her a coffee and a muffin. They talked. Not about anything heavy, just small things. Weather, the neighborhood, whether oat milk was actually worth the extra $1. The kind of conversation that says you're allowed to be here without saying it out loud. Before the girl left, Tanya slipped her a business card. Not Philip's, her own. Tanya Moore, Senior Safety Analyst, Caldwell Biomedical Industries. On the back, handwritten in blue ink, Gracefield Shelter. Ask for Alma. The girl looked at the card, looked at Tanya, nodded once, and walked out. Tanya and Brielle left a few minutes later. Brielle took her mother's hand on the sidewalk. 12 years old and usually too cool for that, but today she didn't care. Mom? Yeah, baby? You think she'll be okay? That girl? Tanya squeezed her daughter's hand. I think she'll be more than okay. She just doesn't know it yet. They walked into the Chicago afternoon. Behind them, through the cafe window, the young woman was still visible, standing under the awning, reading the back of Tanya's card, tracing the handwriting with her thumb. And for the first time in what looked like a very long time, she smiled. Inside the cafe, the corner table sat empty. Above it, Ray's brass plaque caught the afternoon light, the seat where it started. Every year, thousands of skilled professionals lose their careers to circumstances they never caused. They send hundreds of applications into silence. They count coins for bus fare. They become invisible. Not because they have nothing to offer, but because no one stops long enough to see them. Some of them are sitting next to you right now.
One thing about this story I will never forget. Losing your job doesn't mean you lost your brain. Losing your house doesn't mean you lost your value. Losing everything on the outside doesn't change what you carry on the inside. Your skills, your knowledge, your experience, nobody can take those from you. Not a layoff, not eviction, not 14 months of silence from 200 applications. What you know is still yours, always. And if that's you right now, if you are in a place where the world has decided you are invisible, hear me, you are not invisible, you are just unseen. There is a difference. Invisible means you have nothing to offer. Unseen means nobody's bothered to look, and that's their problem, not yours. So don't stop learning, don't stop growing, don't let your circumstances convince you that you are less than what you are. Because one day, one moment, everything you've been carrying is going to matter. And when that moment comes, you will be ready. Because you never stop. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, your worst chapter is not your whole story. Keep going. The world just hasn't caught up you yet.